Morning, Board of Directors meeting for HART. Today is Thursday, July 20th, 2017. It's roughly 9:05 in the morning. Let's call this meeting to order. Item number 2, is there any public testimony at this time on any of the agenda items? I just want to know, okay, go ahead.
Oh, yours isn't on either. Oh, you got. Tommy was ready.
Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Cliff Slater. I'm chair of HonoluluTraffic.com. I'm here to testify on all 15 items. How long do I have?
What is it, 2 minutes?
2 minutes per item or 2 minutes
2 minutes
altogether?
total,
So it gives me, what, 10 or 15 seconds for each
in
item?
each one.
Okay. Okay, I'm here to support the letter that John Henry Felix wrote to you all. I think that it's a long time, as I tried to say last time, that it's really time that the board came clean, especially on the issue of ridership. I particularly objected last time to being stopped by Mr. Fristecki. In 2008, a pro-rail group, Go Rail Go, was publicly launched as a group of local residents forming a quote, strong, widespread grassroots movement for Honolulu's rail transit project, said Maid Timpson, spokesperson. They were often in the front group for PRP, trying to break up our rallies, interfering with Governor Cayetano's run for mayor. Their spokesperson used abusive language of the type not suitable for children in her opposition to our group. In fact, as it later turns out, Go Rail Go was begun at the behest of Mayor Hanneman, or his then managing director, and its leaders were Jim Lyon and Wes Fristecki, president and vice president respectively, both non-bid contractors working on the rail project. And they were funded by hundreds of thousands of dollars by, among others, Parsons Brinckerhoff. The city lied to the FTA about Parsons Brinckerhoff having no connection to Go Rail Go, and I assume Mr. Fristecki went along with that. That's the kind of thing that we've been faced with all along, just trying to make the case, and our case was actually far more optimistic than the reality we face today. And I think it's time that that HART, as I said last time, is a propaganda arm for the rail group, and I think it's time that everything came up on the table and we see everything about this project, from the FEIS, or even before for the draft EIS, which I wrote 67 pages of criticism of the draft EIS.
Okay, could you please wrap it up already?
Sure. I think Mr. Fristecki is a preparer of as a listed preparer of the FEIS. I can understand him being somewhat defensive about it. But as I said before, just in summation, I think everything should come up on the table, which is what John Henry Felix is calling for. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify? Yes, please come forward.
Good morning.
Good
My name
morning.
is Bobby Slater, and I'm also here to thank John Henry Felix for his thoughtful and thorough and courageous letter that he's written on this. We all know how politically difficult it is, and I know that Mr. Felix and I both remember that when Reen Moncho changed her vote and voted no in 1992, she left the room with the police escort. So I know it was difficult, and believe me, sir, the community's behind you. Now that the council has given you enough money to rob Peter to pay Paul, there's no real urgency, I think, for the legislature to meet you with more funding. They eventually will have to do it, but there's no urgency at the moment, because at the moment, everything is all right. But I really, really urge you to do a forensic audit and learn from the past 5 years. At the moment, we're billions of dollars over budget, we're years behind schedule, and you've only been working on the easy part. Think what will happen when you get downtown, where it's going to be very difficult. There's still time to figure out what's been going wrong and how you can make it right. According to a Civil Beat poll recently, 87% of the community is strongly concerned about this project. It's difficult to get 87% of the population to agree on anything, so I thought that was a pretty impressive number. Please look ahead. There are a lot of things that can be done to actually relieve congestion. Please look at all of the options, because this community cannot afford any more of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to come forward and testify? If not, we do have, for the record, that Natalie Iwase had sent in testimony. Board, it was distributed to you folks. We have a special guest this morning. I'd like to call up Mayor Caldwell.
Good morning and aloha.
Morning.
I want to thank the chair of the board and all the board members for allowing me to come and testify for a few minutes on issues that I think are important from the perspective of the administration. Before that, though, I do want to thank all of you for your incredibly hard work. I can't think of a more important job than the job you're doing in the state of Hawaii. And you're tasked with a difficult construction project, the largest ever in the history of this place. And there are going to be problems, and you don't run from the problems, you run to them. I want to thank you for your courage and commitment and hard work. I also wanted to thank the council. You saw in the past couple weeks, they voted twice now for the issuance of bonds, authorization of bonds. We heard someone just before me talk about courage. It takes a lot of courage to support something. In fact, a lot of times it's harder to say I'm for something than against something. And in our country and in our community, there are more people willing to stand up to say they're against than for. Because when you're for something, you got to have a solution. We have a Honolulu City Council who has repeatedly shown bravery, going all the way back to the first votes in 2008, and authorizing twice now the actual county surcharge of 0.5%. They actually voted to create this surcharge. That is political bravery. And they've done it twice, and they continue to show support for the project in the issuance of bonds. And I'm proud of them, all of them, for putting up and dealing with the issue and staying the course now for some odd 10 years. I want to thank the legislature during this session, tackling a difficult issue. They could have run from it, they could have deferred it, they didn't. They're still working on a solution, and I'm appreciative of what they've been doing during this interim period. Leadership is meeting, some of them are meeting with you, some of our guys are meeting with them, and they're working to come up with a solution, a financing solution that works for everybody. And I think that's really important, that we continue to provide the information they need. The other thing with the council is their vote sends two important messages. One is to the FDA, our partner, $1.55 billion at stake. They continue to stay with us. They've demanded a full recovery plan. On the 30th of April, have not received it, the financing part, but they stay with us. It's important that we send a message to them through our Honolulu City Council and the mayor and the HART board that we stand with the project, The other one is the legislature. The authorizing the bonds tells the legislature that they stand firm with the project. But I wanted to talk about 3 issues in particular. One is your funding resolution that's up on the agenda today. I wanted to talk about City Charter Amendment number 4, and then the issue of audits that's had a lot of attention recently. For me, the reso that you have before you is a little different than the previous one you voted on. The previous one focused on extending the GET sufficient to complete the project. And it's something I prefer. And I prefer it because it's been in place for 10 years. It's withstood challenge. It works. And I actually liked what Professor Randy Roth had to say the other day at the council when he said, the mayor supports this proposal because people don't feel it. Yeah. I support a funding mechanism that's the least painful. Not more painful, the least painful. That's my preference. I understand in the resolution that you draft, you're trying to let the legislature know you're looking at other forms of funding, and I support that too. But I think it needs to be made clear in this reso that we're talking about new money, external money, not money that's part of the City and County of Honolulu's operating budget. As you know, some of the proposals that were made during the last session had Honolulu's TAT money, almost 45 million being taken away and applied to rail, or your budget being paid about 21 million out of HART, out of operating money. Could have created a puka of $70 million every year in our budget. But in addition, they were looking to additional funding coming out of our operating budget up to maybe $1 billion. That would be a financial disaster for the City and County of Honolulu, and different than almost any other legacy rail system being built, which all comes out of a sales tax. So I think this reso has to be worked on a bit and made clear that we're looking to the legislature to provide us the authority to extend the surcharge or give us TAT up front, but new money. Because the council and this mayor are not going to support putting a huge financial burden on the people of this island more than what they're already paying. I think we do a great job every day doing the things the city demands. And I think what the response to the Marco Polo fire from our first responders, fire, police, EMS, bus, OED, they all stepped up and did their job. I think we'd be proud of it. But that's what we do every day with our operating money. And I don't want to see it diverted because either we raise real property taxes significantly or we cut services. The final point on the reso that why I'm here today is in a week and a half, I go to San Francisco before our bond raters, Moody's and Fitch, because we're going to be issuing bonds for you guys to build the project, $350 million in the middle of August. And so we're going to be there talking to them. And I'd like to show them a reso that tells them we're looking to fund rail from external funding sources and that HART supports this. Because we've been told by our bond underwriter that if we start going down a road of saying we're going to build rail with operating funds, unlike any other system, that the people who buy our bonds are going to be very concerned and that we could have a downgrade in our bond. We have a AA+. We're better than the state of Hawaii. We're there because of the strong financial management, not of just this administration, but previous ones. We watch our costs. Our operating budget this past year was basically flat. If you took out of things we couldn't control, like increases in OPEB or salaries or those kind of things, basically flat. And we also raised revenue. As you may know, we've raised revenue in terms of vehicle weight tax, parking fees, increasing bus fares, all to go into a fund that will help operate our bus system, our handy-van system, and yes, and someday our rail system integrated together. But those two things, controlling costs, raising revenue, is what protects our bond rating. We need a reso that makes it clear we're talking about external outside money, not internal money. So I'd appreciate you taking a close look at that. I wanted to talk second about Charter Amendment number 4 that was passed, affecting HART. One of them, the significant thing is operation and maintenance of the system will be transferred from HART to DTS and has been once the system starts and is turned over to us. But I think an equally important part dealt with the transfer of power to you. Because under the previous kind of balance, it wasn't clear what the executive director held and what the HART board held. And I would hear things, we can't do certain things, that it's not defined. And so, under efforts by Colleen Hanabusa and others, the charter amendment was proposed, the people voted for it, that basically transfers more power to all of you. It says things like the board shall adopt rules and regs having the force of law to carry out the provisions of this charter, including 1, the internal management of the authority, and 2, allocation of decision-making responsibilities between the board and the administrative staff. Now, shortly, you're going to be bringing on, I understand, a new executive director out recruiting. I don't know where exactly you are, but someone will show up. At that point, I think it's time to tell the executive director, here's the line that you can go up to, and here's what we're going to do. And it's laid out and made clear. And it can be all kinds of things. I was just thinking, what would I want if I was on the board? I'd want to approve any and all amendments to the full funding grant agreement. It's not clear whether you can or can't, but I would just put it right out there that you want to be able to do that. Some other things. Oversight on audits. Who decides? You do? Or does the executive director decide? Criteria for extending a rail line, if that happens. Who decides that? You or the executive director? How about things dealing with TOD and impacts surrounding affordable housing? Do you leave it up to the executive director, or do you decide? Intergovernmental agreements and amendments. At what point do you step up to approve, and at what point does the executive director get to do it? Even things like public testimony, scope, matter, oral, written, exemptions. Does board approve it? Does the executive director approve it? These are things that I think should be in your board policy, and making it clear to the executive director how far he or she can go and what your responsibilities are. And I encourage you to take that up. The amendment was passed in November. It became effective in July. And I think it would be a good time to take a look at your board policies and see where you can make it clear. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about was the issue of audits. And I wanted to say that, one, I support audits. And I disagreed with Dan Grabowskis when we had the city audit, and he pushed back hard, and I told him privately, I think we should accept an audit and look at it, and we can agree on certain things, disagree on others, but I think audits are very useful. Help us review what we've done, help us decide where we made mistakes and how we can improve, and also audits confirm on the things we're doing right. But it's how do we use them? What do we do with them? And I brought some of these audits along with me, and I see you have them on your agenda, but we have the city audit that was done in April of 2016, very extensive, a lot of good points made here. I question how many of you guys have read this on the board. We have this PMC report, the 2016 Risk Refresh report done in June of 2016, final. Very good project management oversight. We have the APTA peer review, which Mike Formby, your executive director, our former DTS director, and I pushed hard for after meeting with the FDA in San Francisco, which was kind of the come to Jesus meeting about, hey, we are not giving you more time and we need a recovery plan by April, and we mean it. But we asked them, what else can we do to find out where we're making mistakes? They said, do an APTA peer review. A review by your peers, by this transportation authority. It was done. It's excellent. I'd ask, how many of you have read this report? What were the main points in this report? There are a few. And they're critical to what you guys do, I believe. We have the HART response in July. So you guys responded. And this I found, which is interesting, this is in the Office of Inspector General, separate from the Department of Transportation, this auditing the FTA. So they have audits. And they're auditing the FTA on what the FTA is doing on our project and other Western projects. It's just interesting to see how they're criticizing what the FTA can do better. the point is, a lot of information, a lot of it's still not being implemented, although I'm glad to see on your agenda you're going to be talking about things that you're going to be implementing. There's so many things you could spend a lot of time improving just with this. But in addition, you have monthly reports to the HART Board of Directors from Murty and others. You have the HART Board Finance Committee and Project Oversight Committee looking at things. You have monthly reports to the FTN, the Project Management Oversight Committee. You have monthly meetings with the Project Management Oversight Committee person. You have quarterly meetings with the FTA. You have FTA triennial reviews. You have FTA and PMOC audits. You have financial audits from independent financial institutions yearly. You're audited by the council every time you go before them and look at the hearings. You can sit there for hours and hours and hours, ask questions, and you have to provide information. You go before the City Council Budget and Finance Committee. You go before the neighborhood boards all the time. You have weekly meetings with me in which sometimes I wish everyone else could sit in that meeting and see how they go. And the past couple were not very pleasant, right, Murty? You have improper payments and elimination of Recovery Act of 2010, where you're being reviewed to see are you doing the payments correctly. You have the audit, you have the city auditor who's auditing, and you have the National Transit Database reporting requirements. The point is, you have a lot of reports being given, and it's what do you do with that information? Do you do another audit? You know, what is a forensic audit? The only time I've heard of a forensic audit is as a lawyer, Terry. I mean, it's when you're doing an audit preparing for litigation. I think any of us are looking for litigation. We're looking to be better. And audits that teach us how to be better or tell us how to be better or confirm practices that are good, we need to know that. So perhaps more audits, or obviously there are going to be a lot more audits, but perhaps an audit looking at how you control construction costs, or why did construction costs go up, is something I think would be worth looking at. But they need to be read. But more importantly, they need to be implemented. And I can speak as a former legislator. We loved audits. We issued audits every year. They come into my office and we put them on their shelf. We thought the audit was doing something. The audit is doing nothing. It's what you do with the audit after the fact. The implementation of the audit is what's critical. So, while I think audits are important, I don't want them to become a distraction. Use what's in them. But there are so many other issues coming up that I think are even more important to pay attention to. Issues like electrification of the system. We're almost ready. We pushed the car up on the track. Everything worked. Now we need to run electricity for the system and see how that works. And will it stop at a station? Will the doors open? Will the computer system manage everything properly? This will take months, if not years. Let's get it done sooner so we can be ahead of schedule. As you come into town, you have the final 4.8 miles. We're working hard to tell our bidders to proceed with the RFP proposals. But what about the utility relocation on Dillingham? What are we doing about that? As mayor, if I was on your board, I'd be looking at creating a separate RFP to relocate utilities now, so you don't create greater delay and get rid of risk. So whoever bids on the last 4.8 miles says we don't need to worry about that because someone else took care of it. At least it should be looked at. At least it should be looked at. And finally, that last city center RFP, where are we? Because of the delay in getting the funding for the last 4.8 miles, are we behind schedule? Can we still tell them to proceed? Are we another year of delay? I've been told through the Ulupono study by Jones Langs and LaSalle, every year delay is $114 million in increased cost. Can we save something and get it out there quicker? Will there be upcoming conflicts that may impact on that? These things need to be focused on by all of you. Addressed and solutions proposed and moving forward. So don't forget the big picture as instead of fighting about how many more audits do we need and what type of audit do we need. There is so much information that can be used, and there's so many things coming up that are so critical that I don't want to lose sight over this dispute on how many audits and what type. But I want to thank all of you for letting me come, and I want to thank you again for your hard work. You guys can't quit. As hard as it is, you got to keep pushing forward. It's so important. It's worth it. We may not see the full benefit in our lifetimes, but what's going to occur after this project is done is going to change how we live in some very similar kinds of ways, making us keep our aloha, helping us live better in neighborhoods and in small communities on this side of the Ko'olaus. So I want to thank you so much for agreeing to serve, for taking the abuse, and coming back and taking more. Thanks so much. If there's any question, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll get out of your way. Thanks for letting me
Members,
speak longer.
any questions for the mayor? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, you know, when I read the newspaper articles about this, calling for another audit, and in our last deliberations on that issue, I mean, I was not in favor of doing another audit for the simple reason that you pointed out. We've gotten a lot of audits done. We've gotten a lot of information. We've incorporated the recommendations. We've directed Murthy to implement them. We'll get an update today. And so I felt that it would have been a waste of time and money, frankly. But I recognize the fact that the press, the general public, are not privy to all the internal effort that goes on in HART. Because on a project this complicated, they can't possibly be, not unless they devote, 100% of their time and effort to it. And so the only reason another audit might be something to consider is simply because the public's asking for it, and it might help ease their mind that there's another independent source that's saying, hey, yes, we agree with all the other audits and reports and recommendations, and here you go. And we're already implementing those things, so maybe it will help instill more confidence in the public, which is, I think, a worthy endeavor for this organization. But I'm not a politician. I don't get voted on the board. This is purely a volunteer position. And so, as I've always maintained, the downside for lack of public confidence really ultimately falls on you, unfortunately, and the council members and the legislators and so on. I just sit here to try to do the best job I can for the interests of the public. So I given those considerations, Mayor, I'm just curious, if you still feel that, we don't need another audit, or would you think maybe we should think about it?
Well, like I said, I'm not opposed to audits, and I ran through a whole bunch of them that you have before you. You asked an interesting question, why are audits done? Are they done for the public or for the people who are building the system? At the end of the day, we're doing these audits so you have the information you need to continue to make sure we're doing everything possible to get the system built for the least amount of money and at a quicker pace. That's what I hope anyway. But yes, there's a public component. As mayor, from day one, people said there's no information on rail, and I would provide binders of information. And then they say, well, you're trying to confuse us because you're giving us so much information. A lot of this information is out there because people demand it, and you provide it. And yeah, it takes a lot of time to read through it. I don't know what to say about that other than you want it, it's going to be provided. So I'm guessing around about, if you feel as a policy, this board feels you need another audit done in some way, I would say that's your decision to make, and I would support it. But I'd be asking, what kind of audit? What is the goal? How does it build off the audits that we have? And then what are we going to do with it? Because if you're getting the audit and not implementing, then it is a waste of money and time. And you're misleading the public to think that somehow this audit is going to make a difference. Because if you're not using it, it's just a piece of paper you put on your shelf. So having said that, if it's going to make a difference, yes. I mean, there isn't a day that I don't ask someone on our staff or when I meet with you, how can we get a better handle on cost, control expenses, and get the schedule ramped up? Can we finish before 2025? Anything that gives you ways to do that, I'm in favor of. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, but that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, go
Any
ahead.
others?
At the last board meeting, I think the board's action was against doing a forensic audit. I don't think that any of us took the position to foreclose a special audit of some type that we could all agree on would be helpful to move the project along or to even do a lessons learned. The one caveat that I would say at this point is that that our charge as a board is limited to building the elevated fixed guideway system consistent with the minimum operating segments, and that's, East Kapolei to Ala Moana and whatever the council extends at a later time. It is not looking at alternative ways to build rail. And that was what I thought was being asked to be considered through a forensic audit, and that is looking at the things that we've done or could have done better, or the costs that could have been or saved or were spent inappropriately as a means of justifying another approach to building rail that is not the elevated fixed guideway. But the charter is very clear. What the people voted on when they approved the rail is very clear, and I've read the charter. I've read it like 3 or 4 times since I've taken this appointment, and it's clear that it's outside of the scope of our responsibility to look at alternatives. Certainly, we can look at ways to do things better, but if the ultimate goal is to use the information to come up with a recommendation to do something else other than build the elevated fixed guideway system, then I would not be in favor of that.
And as mayor, I'd say I think your task is to build the 20-mile, 21-station elevated fixed guideway under the full funding grant agreement. That is your task and your responsibility to the people of this island. If someone wants to change the system, technology, that is a policy decision to be made by the Honolulu City Council. They're two different. So I agree on that point. And I did read the letter, and they did talk about alternatives, at grade and all of these things we've talked about for decades. You're not there. You're building an elevated fixed guideway system, 20 miles, 21 stations, driverless system.
Yes, great.
Mr. Chair, no, the only thing I want to add at this point is, because I think the question has been raised, holding by implication, that perhaps we're not, as board members, reviewing everything, and that there's a lot of material out there, which there certainly is. So I just want to reiterate what Vice Chair Lee said, that no, we're not politicians. We're just regular citizens like everybody else. We do read the material, we do the best job we can, and that I think the one thing we do share for the most part is our desire to see this project succeed in the best way possible, at the most cost-effective way possible. I mean, we're all taxpayers too. Some of us pay a hell of a lot more taxes than others, in fact. No, we want to see the money well spent. I think we also share a desire to see the future of Oahu and Honolulu insured for future generations. That's our goal. And so we do pay attention to what we're doing. We do take this seriously. And we are mindful of what other people say, but what it comes down to, it's our responsibility. And we do take it seriously.
Thank you. I appreciate that reaffirmation. It's good to hear.
Yeah, and, I'd just like to say that, Glenn O'Hara and I met with the Salvage the Rail folks last week, and And, you know, they have some very impressive consultants that shared some very interesting ideas about going on grade, stopping at Middle Street, all of that stuff. But as I told them, and as Ember stated, that's not our decision. You know, the charter's clear, I'm staring at it right now. Yeah, we're limited to developing the fixed guideway system, which is a defined term, which means the minimum operable segment approved by the city council.
Yeah.
And any extensions. So I told them, thank you for their time, and I think, you know, it's fascinating what their ideas are, but they're talking to the wrong people. They really need to go to the council and probably the legislature. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you making that clear, and I agree with you 100% on that.
Any other one? So I just want to last comment, I guess, Mayor, is that you're correct, as being the person that's been here from day one, that is our goal. Our goal is to build that elevated system and do it as prudently as possible. So we'll take everything into consideration in what you have talked about today. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for allowing me to speak longer than 2 minutes. I appreciate it. And thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Moving to item number 3, approval of minutes, meeting minutes of the June 22nd, 2017 meeting of the Board of Directors.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a comment to make. These are minutes for the entire meeting, and the last page of the minutes refer to how we adjourned and reconvened on July 6th. So I would like to recommend that we defer any approval of these minutes until we can add what we did on July 6th.
Okay, and that was a call for recess, not adjournment, but recess. right?
Recess, yes.
Okay. So the motion is to get it deferred until we include our meeting on the July 6th itself.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Okay, item number 3 is deferred. Item number 4, American Public Transportation Association, or the APTA peer review update. Sam?
Mr. Chairman, just before Sam comes in, we just heard from the mayor also about his concern of implementing all these audit recommendations and these peer review recommendations. So we have been diligently going through all the recommendations, and wherever we can immediately implement them, we have done it. Where there is an organizational structural improvements that we have done. So Sam is going to go through all of them as to where we are to each of those recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Sam?
Good morning, Chair and Board. My name is Sam Carnaggio. I'm the project director. Been the project director for the past 3 years. Just a little bit of history. This peer review actually was originally came out of the 2016 risk refresh by the PMOC. Spoke about for a couple of months, and as the mayor mentioned, in our meeting in San Francisco on August 30th, we asked what we could do, and they suggested an APTA peer review. Both HART and myself are members of the APTA, American Public Transportation Authority, and so we association. And we did contact a number of people. It took a number of months to get the right people on board, but the benefits were we got people who knew our business, who have done our business. We were able to get them on board in January. They spent 2 weeks here, went through a review, came up with their report in March. We gave an update to the board in May, and this is another update, and we'll continue to do it as long as the board requests it. I've written and ran through a number of these with the CEO. I don't know that you want me to go through all of them at your leisure, but I would point out a couple of what I consider to be the significant ones. The first one is the staffing, and it does ask for us to expedite finding a director of design and construction, which is a critical position. We lost Chris Tagashigi in December. I've picked up his responsibility since then. I'm happy to say that we have a new director of design and construction. He's sitting over here, Frank Kosage. He comes from, his latest job is in New York with the MTA, with the 2nd Avenue subway. and he's got great experience, and he's already picked up a lot. That's a key position, especially a key position for me since I've been carrying a lot of his work. We've also picked up a risk manager within the past 2 weeks who's on board, Paul Johnson, and we picked up a safety certification manager. These were three, his name's Rayid Dwari, and these are 3 key positions that we needed filled. We are continuing with our management staffing. We have one or two more positions to fill. We're very confident within the next month we'll be able to fill those also. Another area that's touched upon in this report is the PMP, Project Management Plan. As a former FTA employee, I have to tell you that it's very important. We haven't updated it since 2012. Staff is working on a lot of things, but we are committed to getting this done. When we get our additional funding after the legislature, we expect to be able to update this and share it with the board. It's a pretty extensive document that we have. We'll be sharing it with you. We've been working with board member Glenn O'Hara with the project management plan. He's been following it pretty closely. Another item that we've implemented that you'll see through here is the master integrated project schedule. The staff has worked very hard on this, and we do have one now. We do share it with all the departments, keeping them abreast of what's going on and letting them contribute to the schedule. The fourth item that I've got down here that I think is of significance is communication and collaboration. Each Tuesday, the CEO has his own meeting with the department heads and goes over various important issues for that particular week. But we also have a project coordination meeting in which all of the project management staff and other departments get together on Monday morning, and we spend an hour going over everything in detail on all of the contracts. Quite extensive, and it keeps everybody in the loop. We also have a follow-up meeting on Fridays with the different departments so that before the weekend, we have no silos in the organization. Everybody knows what's going on. It's more an upbeat and positive discussion to let everybody know a lot of the good things that are going on. So come the weekend, if they interact with other people, they can share those good thoughts. And the last item I'll mention that was of significance was a recommendation for a change control board and contract change order procedures. We have instituted that. The change control board has met on 2 occasions, and we're implementing that process right now. There still are a number of items that we still have to address. I want to let you know that we're continuing on a regular basis to communicate. If you'll go through this, you'll see that HART concurs on every one of the suggestions that were made. This was done by our peer professionals throughout the nation, and we take it very seriously. Chair?
Yes, so Samuel Murthy, what haven't we done on the peer review that's of significance, and is there a timeline of when we need to get this thing done by?
Well, as I said, the most important thing was the PMP, the project management plan. That's probably the most significant. If you'll notice on page, the first page, under recommendations 1.0, at the bottom there was a discussion about the staff turnover. We've had a tremendous turnover in the past 4 years especially. Probably out of 120-something positions, we've had 80 people turnover, 80 positions turnover. That's a lot. But the CEO met with the mayor and the city's Department of Human Resources about the possibility of changing from the 1-year contracts, and instead DHR came back and proposed that we create an internal committee to develop recommendations on pay levels, to increase the pay levels for people with specialized skills. And the CEO is in the process of putting together a committee. Murthy,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, all of these recommendations are extremely important. This is a very fast-moving project, so we have a lot of catching up to do in addition to keep the momentum of the project itself. So what we are trying to do is prioritize some of these. For example, as Sam just presented, creating the change control procedures to make sure we have good checks and balances have been done. and creating the change control board to make sure that all the changes are validated by a separate group of individuals other than the field. So that's been done. So we have prioritized the recommendations and trying to implement them as quickly as possible. But there is some delays in some cases because of the process and procedure it takes to get it done. We need to update all the manuals. That's what we are right now working on it. PMP is one of them. Project implementation plan, quality plan, all of those things are being done. It's a lot of catching up to do, and shortage of staff has definitely impacted some of it. Now with some of the key people on board, hope to catch up very quickly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, I'm kind of curious about the change control board. The APTA peer review said to reestablish it. Why was it ever discontinued?
It was done prior to my arrival. I'm not sure the reasons for it. When I came in, I thought that was one of the first things I felt it should be in place, and that's been done. I cannot answer the past. I don't know.
It predates me also, Wes.
You mentioned the word departments a lot. Can you clarify that that's departments within HART as opposed to departments like city departments?
Yes, it's within HART, like procurement and construction and design.
So on your project management schedule, as you probably know, we have continuous conversations with your staff, with your consultants, with your subcontractors about permitting. And so I would request that that project, master project schedule, can that be shared with our department on a regular, consistent, continuous basis so that it becomes a basis for us looking at the big picture and being able to service your urgent rush needs in a little bit more timely manner? That would be very helpful for us.
Certainly, Board Member.
Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one
Yes.
comment. On this past month's PMOC monthly report, it refers back to the peer review. And the Mayor touched on it briefly, is that a technical peer review for the remaining contracts to identify opportunities to contain and mitigate, contain costs and mitigate risks. So in particular, we should be working on a team on how we should contract out the remaining city center work.
I think actually the reference was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Board Member, but the reference was bringing somebody in from outside, somebody in the industry to take a look at our procurement to see if there's a better way to do certain things.
Okay, so it referenced a group of experts. But I think we can, one of your answers was that, responses was that we could do it with our in-house consultants and staff. But we should be looking at that to see if there's a better way to procure it.
Yeah, oh, yes.
In relation to where we are on design, utility relocation design, in which segments can we, if we get the approval, how can we better procure this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I've been in discussion with our procurement group on that issue. We will definitely do that.
Okay. And I understand we're still working on improving our project status or project trend reports.
Yes,
so we
the
can see how it
project
ties into our overall budget.
Yeah, we've recently sent you, in particular, a forecast
Right.
report, but that's not a trend report. We're trying to develop the trend report, and hopefully that, we'll get it done by, we're looking, right now, we've got it scheduled for probably, again, my forecast, the end of September.
Okay, and PMOC also mentioned it, but if we can get it in an Excel format, so
Yes,
we can sort it,
yeah.
right? Right
Well,
now, it's
I
kind
think
of
that was the
difficult to do
forecast.
that.
You wanted the forecast, I think, in the Excel format,
Right.
and we did get it to them,
Okay.
because they wanted to do a couple different things and manipulate it in some ways.
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
The The plan is to work on updating the project management plan after the legislature determines the funding for the project. To what extent does the delay in updating the project management plan, which you said hasn't been looked at since 2012?
Oh, it's been looked at. It hasn't been finalized, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's in the process of being updated, but the funding and possibly the organization, you've heard the CEO mention reorganization, has a definite effect on the project management plan.
So when you're saying the legislature determines the funding, you can't update it until you know whether you're going to be building the city center segment? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
As opposed to needing the legislature funding to actually do the work to update it?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I
Okay,
understand.
it's not dependent on that funding for us to update it. I could have written it better.
Okay, I was just confused about that. Okay. To what extent does that make you less confident that you're imposing all the cost controls and you're looking at all the claims and being as fiscally responsible as possible?
Has nothing to do with it at all. We are doing that. We are definitely going through the claims and we have a handle on the rest of it. This is just a question of telling you what we're doing and the plan for going forward.
Okay, sort of a critical issue though, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's for us to know what's going on and
Absolutely.
what the future holds. Okay.
Any other questions? Not. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Item number 5, City Auditor's April 2016 Report Update.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this is the audit that just now the mayor talked extensively about, done in 2015-16. They pretty much identified about 21 key items, various departments and the various issues in their audit. Most of them are interrelated, and I think we have provided copies of the response that I sent to the city, the part of your package. That was given to them on January 20th of this year. That was one of my first acts that I did as soon as I came on board, to get this audit, go through it and make sure we implement all of those that are reasonable and that are applicable. We can do that. I've asked Robert Hugh to go through, in general, how these 21 items are interrelated and what we are doing in implementing those audit recommendations.
Sure. Good morning, Chair Kim, members of the board. The city audit that was completed in April 2016 has 18 recommendations. And really, those 18 recommendations are summarized in 3 main chapters of the audit. First, one of the chapters is improve financial management and planning. Another chapter relates to improving project management and contract administration. And one of the last chapter has to do with looking at better planning and managing future rail costs. So, and I'll go over each one of those areas. In the areas of better financial management, we started the process maybe about 2 months ago, and we have worked with project control under Sam's direction to just get a better handle on project expenditures, not in terms of total, but in terms of, monthly project expenditures, quarterly, annual, for the current fiscal year and also up to 2025. So our process is looking at all the major contracts that we have, and at the same time, try to coordinate the expenditures to the master contract schedule that are available. And we're going to do that monthly. On a general basis, quarterly, we'll have a comprehensive review, whether all the expenditures are continues to be on schedule with respect to the timing as compared to the master schedule. Another thing we started the process of is to meet with the project managers of each major contract. about a week and a half ago, we met with the project managers of the Airport Guideway and Station Group. And, you know, it's a way to open communication, to have better communication with the staff out on the field. I'm not sure what went on in the past, whether there's open communication between the finance staff and the budget staff and the project managers out in the field. But I think it's important to know what's going on out there so we could project what the project costs and the project expenditures are. We want to know any time that the project schedule may change or there's any cost changes, you know, down the road. We don't want to know it last minute. We want to know it 6 months, a year, 2 years ahead of time, so we could build that expenditure and build that cost into the forecast. That being said, beginning next month, the August board meeting, we will provide the board with a detailed monthly expenditure schedule, including revenue and reconciling the revenue and expenditures to beginning cash and ending cash. And we will do that on a monthly basis. So in August, you will get a report that shows the actual activities for fiscal year 2017. And also at the same time, we will provide you with a projection of all revenue and expenditure and cash activities for fiscal year 2018. So thereafter, every board meeting, we will update the actual revenue we receive and the expenditures that we pay out on a monthly basis. So you will have complete information on what came in to HART and what went out on a monthly basis, that you could make better decisions that way. The other item that the auditor mentioned is that we should have better support of some of our forecasts. In terms of that, we've been attending the Council on Revenue's quarterly meetings, and we're in the process of updating our revenue forecast based on some of the information that we get from the meeting, some of the discussions, and also the report that they issue after the meeting. So we have better support, we have a better idea on how revenue and how much of the revenue we think will come in now and in the future. One of the big ticket items that was mentioned in the audit report is to replace our CMS system. Our CMS system is a mission critical system where it contains pretty much all information about the project. You know, any documentations with respect to the project, changes, contracts. The HART staff use it, our consultants use it, and more importantly, our contractors out in the field use it. We're in the process of evaluating the risk of replacing such a mission-critical system in midterm. You know, we're 5 years into the project. We just want to make sure what we do does not jeopardize any essential information that are available currently. Next week, we have someone coming in to talk to the staff to take a look at the requirements of the system, and we'll have a report back to the board on the results of that study and see whether it's how feasible it is to replace CMS. The next area, the next chapter has to do with improved project management and contract administration. And I think this is an area that both the city auditor and the peer review group recognize that there needs to be changes made in that area. And the comments made by the city auditor is pretty similar to what the comments made by the peer review group. Which has to do with contract administration, change order management. So I think Sam gave a pretty good overview of what we need to do in that area. So I really don't want to repeat that. And the last item that the city auditor mentioned is to have better planning and manage future rail costs. I think that more or less has to do with operating rail, you know, the operations and maintenance costs that may be incurred during interim service and at full service in 2025. Now, I understand that HART is no longer responsible for the operating and maintenance of the rail system, but I could tell you that we will help DTS any way we can to make sure the transition, to make sure what they need, to make sure we provide everything that they need so that they could fulfill the responsibilities when the rail system comes online. And that concludes my report.
Just before he concludes, one more item I would like to say is my focus has been to get the software system that we have, the CMS system that we have is, it's in a pretty bad shape at this stage. So we are just keeping it alive. We're using some off-the-shelf items and getting it going. I think ultimately for good checks and balances, my focus is to connect the system with the project control, who has all the latest information on the project progress and schedule and everything, with the procurement department, who has got the changes and change control information, and the finance. So all three of them are looking at the same numbers and same things, so coordinated reports comes out of it. So that's our focus, and I think if we accomplish that, that will answer, I think, almost all of the questions the auditors have raised.
Yeah, right.
And that's what we are working on.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
A long time ago, when the city first hired InfraConsult as a fledgling beginning of this whole HART system, it was discussed that there was a new software tracking system that would be the umbrella tracking system that would reach out to all tasks associated with HART and including connections with other departments. So that was never implemented?
I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I'm not either. I got to find out what that is. I'll be happy to look into it.
Okay, it was a newly, as I understand and recall, it was a newly created software designed specifically to manage this kind of project.
Okay, we'll be happy to look into it, for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Item number 6 is a HART Board of Directors Annual Report. I got Robert.
Robert,
Got you on top of you. Can't run away that fast.
I should have walked faster. Okay, so this item has to do with a new city ordinance requiring the HART Board of Directors to submit an annual report to the City Council after the fiscal year ended. We're recommending to the board to defer the report, the issuance of the report until we have more clarity on what the funding situation is. Because one of the big items in that report is to update our financial plan.
Right, yeah. So whatever we put in now will be purely a guess on our part. So we would rather wait for clarity and then give a good report as soon as we get the information.
Okay. Yes.
We're under the same deadline, Department of Planning and Permitting, I believe, so that the idea here is that your report that they're being requested of you now is to include that report in the entire city annual report, is that? And so if you ask to hold up your deadline, does that hold up the whole city report? Because it's just a chapter in that report.
Oh, are we talking about the city's audited, the CAFR report?
No,
or
just
are
the
we-
annual report. not related to the audit.
Okay, when is the city's annual report has to be out?
Well, we had a deadline of this month as a
Okay.
city department. So I'm not sure we're talking about the same product.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
I think we'll be happy to inform them where we are. Yeah, we don't want to produce something that's not going to be applicable 2 months from now. So our recommendation is to wait for clarity on the funding sources and give a report that can withstand the scrutiny.
I understand what you're saying, it's just that if that's the portion in a city overall report that's just one chapter, does that mean you're asking the city to hold up on finalizing that report?
Oh, I was just told that there are two different reports. We are working on the report that you mentioned,
Okay.
Director.
So it's a different report?
Yeah, this report is required by ordinance.
Yeah, this is, you're right, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, they're all required by ordinance.
Anybody have any other questions? If not, can I get a motion to defer the Board of Directors annual report?
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is carried.
Thank
Thank you. Item number 7 is a resolution 2017-8 regarding the position of the Board of Directors on a funding increase in the Honolulu Rail Transit project. In light of what the mayor had discussed earlier on the amendment, I would like to call for an executive session. I think we need to seek advice of our attorney, the board's attorney, on this matter. Given the information received, I can get a motion to enter into executive session to consult with our attorney or questions or issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities under HRS 92-5A4. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Here, a second? All those in favor, aye. Those opposed? We are now recessed into executive session. I believe we went to that room over there. Breaking of jackets.
That's why I wore a jacket.
Yeah.
The refrigerator.
Okay, got it. Regarding item number 7, resolution 2017-8, the board went into executive session just to discuss with our legal attorney, just to make sure that what we are doing is the correct action. But, you know, what we want to do, board, if I could recommend deferring the action to resolution 2017-8, and then primarily that is because we like to work with our state legislators and city and council and the mayor regarding putting something together. We already have resolutions 1 and 3 that are in place now, so it's just making sure that, again, we want to work with all parties involved regarding the funding increase itself. So can I get concurrence on the deferred action?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, resolution 2017-9, gift policy revision. Murthy?
This is based on the charter amendments. They have made recommendation that any acceptance of a gift concerning HART be received by the board rather than the executive director. So that's basically in essence of the, I think, Randy, you have any clarifications on that?
I believe it conforms with the amendments to the charter.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's basically just changing executive director, CEO, and in replacing with the HART Board of Directors or the board itself.
I'm sorry, I was reminded I need to speak into the microphone.
Microphone.
Deputy Corporation Counsel Randall Ishikawa. Yes, the policy conforms to the amendments in Charter Amendment number 4.
Okay.
Chair, in conformance with the policy, we got a gift here giving the Excellence Award for the MSF building. So I'm going to hand it over to you, to the chair, following the gift policy.
So I can polish it. We can polish it.
Mr.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for an excellent job. I'll be handing it back to you to polish. It's nice. Okay, can I get a motion to the resolution 2017-9 of redoing the gift policy revision?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 9, Resolution 2017-10 regarding the acceptance of Environmental Protection Agency's Brownfields Grant. Abby and Doug?
Aloha, Chair, board members. I'm Abby Mayer, Director of Planning, Permitting, and Right-of-Way at HART. I'm with Doug Collison, a HART Grant Manager. And very briefly, by way of introduction, HART was awarded a grant from the EPA, amount of $900,000. I want to note that and give some special credit to a staff member of ours, Y.E. Ng, who's our environmental compliance and hazardous materials manager, who really had the initiative to put the grant application together. It was submitted right around the time of the inauguration when we had a lot of concerns about the EPA's capacity to continue its grant programs, but she had faith and put the application together and was awarded. To be extra clear, all the work that is going to be funded in the scope of work is work we're going to be doing anyway. It's not extra work. It relates to about 1/3 of it, $300,000, is for the assessment of hazardous materials on sites along the guideway alignment, and 2/3, $600,000, is specifically to help with the remediation of arsenic and heavy metals at the Evile station site. It's really most of the particulars. Doug's here to walk you through the mechanics and the fiscal requirements of accepting the grant and the responsibilities that we'll have, but that's really my portion of the presentation.
So really we're just asking for, respectfully requesting for authority to approve the grant and accept it. It's $900,000 federally from the EPA. The overall match is about 85%. It's kind of broken down into two separate agreements. One's for assessments, that's 100% federal, and the other section is cleanup, where the future Evile station is going to be. That is 80% federal, so it's just going to give us a little bit more bang for our buck. That's why it was really attractive to apply for it. The administrative requirements on my side is it's only going to require one annual report per year, and we have available 3 years to use this money. So I would strongly recommend that we would accept the grant.
Well, thank you very much. Accepting money is always great. So we got 2 things in a row that we got from GCA and also now $900,000. So I appreciate that. Board, is there any questions? Other than that, thank you very much for you guys' hard work for getting that grant money. Can I get a...
So moved.
There you go, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you again for
Thank you,
$900,000.
Chair.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Item number 10, letter of editor regarding special audit. You know, it was brought up a lot of discussion this morning, both mayor and going to the APTA review and seeing all the different audits that HART does go through. You know, and just quickly, just speaking in regards to the editor letter that, you know, came out in regards to this, you know, the board, not only Member Shin, but the board felt that at this time a forensic type of audit is not needed. A special audit is possibly down the line. You know, and hearing what we heard this morning, I think with what we're doing to APTA, also noticing all the staff changes, whether they're leaving and those new that are coming in. I think we have a renewed energy with the staffing that's coming in, that they understand what HART is going through financially and is being very prudent in the things that they do. Murthy, changing the organizational structure as well to try to make it more efficient. I think it's going to help cut down some of the costs. But at the same time, I don't think we're not open to any type of special audit itself that, I feel that we may need one down the line again. We do have, we're looking at that new CEO coming in, and, we want the input as that person as well, too, on how we move forward, as that will be the permanent CEO. So if the board, again, doesn't mind, it's just a matter of this matter is just being deferred. It's not that we do not want any special audit, and we just want to make that clear to that as well.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully disagree. I feel it's imperative that we conduct a forensic audit. The public has a right to know. Transparency has to prevail. There's a lack of confidence in this project. And I think with a forensic audit, we'll get to the root causes of the problems of the past so that we can make the necessary corrective action and proceed with this project with great vigor and in a robust way. But we have to revisit the past, and that can only be done through a thorough, intensive, specific forensic audit, not a general audit, not the audits that the mayor referred to, not the peer reviews that he referred to. Those are very helpful, very instructional, but they are not the type of audit that we need. We have to find out where the money went and why, and not repeat the mistakes of the past. History has a tendency to repeat itself, and we don't want to have a repetition of the mistakes of the past. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. And, thank you. It just reminded me that Brennan, before he left, was supposed to be putting a timeline together from the past to show the major events that happened along the way and cost-wise. Murthy, can you follow through? Because, Brennan is not with us anymore. Can we get somebody to do that report, continue that report and report it back to the board?
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
a timeline is not a forensic audit.
No, I know that, but it will help explain, because I know we have a lot of new board members that, need to be brought up to speed on some of these things along the way. Yes.
Mr. Chair, one of the reasons I brought up this issue and I asked for this to be placed on the agenda is not related to the forensic audit, but related to how the board reacts when it needs to respond to a media, and specifically in your materials, it's the Civil Beat article. And because I thought that the Civil Beat article was incorrect, because we do have annual financial audits, and we've had it forever. And every governmental entity in the world has to have an annual financial audit. And that's what I really wanted to explain quickly in response to the Civil Beat article. And of course, now we have since had the Star Advertiser editorial opinion. And so part of the issue is I haven't found or seen a policy of the board on how we react to media. And because I think that we need to have a kind of a rapid response, because now it's old news, and we've done a lot of explaining here today, as well as other people have explained it to the media since then. But when the media reports something that is clearly erroneous about what the HART does, or a policy, a stated policy of HART, I think we just have to have a process. So that was my why I asked to have this be put on the agenda, so that we could talk about this as a process. I think now, whether we do a letter to the editor, an op-ed piece or something like that, it's old news. It's still an important issue. No disrespect to my colleague here, but it's the impetus for doing a response, I think, is time dated.
Yes, correct.
So,
Are we in on council? Is there a resolution that we need to make in regards to this, or is this something just on a standalone policy, or?
Yes, Deputy Corporation Counsel Randall Ishikawa. Yes, as to if the board wants to adopt a policy, perhaps authorizing an officer of HART, a designated officer, or the board chair to respond, that could be something the board could do, or else the board could, if the board itself wishes to issue a response, it would be constrained by the Sunshine Law and would need to do it through the board meeting process. So those are the alternatives. However, as we have gone through before, some boards and commissions have the chair responding in their capacity as the chair. So there are options, and those are some quick comments here. As to any more specifics, we can research it and present it if requested in an executive session of the board.
Is there any questions or the pleasure of the board on what they would like to do moving forward?
I'm happy to have the chair be the rapid responder on something like this as a protocol.
Okay.
In the absence of not having a written resolution, I would like to make a motion to designate the chair as the rapid responder to any media events that need to be addressed because they include inaccurate statements that are known to the board and to the agency.
Okay. So can I just amend that to chair and/or co-chair in case I'm not around or I'm not able to?
Or
How about
designee.
chair or his designee?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Second.
that. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Sorry, okay. Thank you. Item number,
Excuse me, Chair.
sorry, yes.
You can call me out of order, but on this issue of the forensic audit or
Yes.
any other audit, I would offer a suggestion that even though I'm a non-voting member, I cannot support a forensic audit at this time due to time and cost implications, and it distracts us from the main goal of building the rail. But can we, in the interest that some of our members are fairly new, and in response to Board Member Lee's comment about the public has a need, perhaps we can ask HART to summarize all the effective audits that we are now obligated and responding to, and summarizing the points that we are working on. That would not be as much time and cost to me as conducting a whole new audit, but just to summarize, as the mayor's had the whole list of all the audits that we are already obligated or are following up in terms of recommendations. So at least there's a nice summary for all of us.
Okay. The board members agree?
Can we take that as a motion and I'll second it?
Okay.
I don't know if I can make a motion.
Oh, yeah. You can make the motion.
I will then make the motion to request the staff to prepare a summary of all the audits that have been conducted and a summary of the response to those audits.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Chair, I got
Yes.
a question. You know, I think the mayor brought up a good point. The mayor
Can I
brought up-
second the motion first
Yeah.
for discussion? Okay, thank you.
You know, we get,
May I
as
ask,
we're,
Oh, wait, hang
what
on.
will we do with it once we get it all put together?
Well, I think the main reason I'm making the motion is because there's so much misinformation in the public that is generated by not having knowledge of what audits have been done and what's their content and how they've been responded to. So I think it will be a very valuable document and people won't have to go around and collect stacks of paperwork and go sifting through them, but they're interested in the subject matter.
What's your thought that this would make the forensic audit unnecessary.
No, that's not what you said.
That's your
No, not necessarily. It's just, I believe the motion is just to summarize all the previous audits that we had, to make sure where we are in case we did miss something along the
I
way.
think the mayor did a very good job on that, that's why.
Well, he didn't go, he went through what audits were done, not
And the peer
what,
reviews.
but not what answers to each of the audit, were. Did we take care of the problem? Are we following some of what the auditors had recommended? Yeah, and I think that's what it is. So we heard some today regarding the peer review, but we didn't hear of all the audits itself, yeah. So it's just a summary of that.
Chair?
Yes.
Well,
Oh,
actually, I think that's a good idea. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
But I think that's a good idea because that'll give us the base of information to know what has been done to help us set the scope for any potential project or audit that is done going forward. Because I think that's one of our issues is what is the scope of what the work that would be done if we were to engage to have a special audit done.
Okay.
Yeah, my concern basically is that, and I think we all deal with audits, and I think the mayor brought it up as well, there's a lot of audits that's been given to us, but who actually reads it? I don't know how you do an executive summary. I don't know how you do a recap on an audit that clearly states basically where the deficiencies are and the recommendations that how you fix those deficiencies. The audit, any audit is very explicit. The scope of work is very explicit. You want to know what the problem is, and from that problem, how you can improve that. How do you put that in an executive summary? I understand what, the board members are saying here, but for me, when I get an audit and it is very clear of what needs to be done to help improve what we're working on right now, and it's an improvement tool. If I get an executive summary, all it's going to tell me is that, okay, these are the recommendations, but if you want to really know what's going on, go read the audit. So are we wasting time or wasting funds doing this? I think as we talk about a forensic audit of what has happened in the past, if we're going to talk about doing something, we should be talking about doing something for the future. I have no problem doing an audit and taking a look at, entrusting a company to come in and take a look at all the audits, peer reviews that were done in the past, and see whether or not how these recommendations can be applied to what we have left to finish off the project. I think that would be very productive. I think it'll be the meeting will be very good in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, but more importantly, it will give HART an opportunity to go ahead and say, listen, all these things that we've invested in the past in terms of having experts come up with resolutions or solutions to how we can resolve, how to implement it in the segments that we have left, and how best to move forward. I think that would probably be the best thing moving forward. So, well, I understand where you're coming from. I would not support basically doing a recap of what's already been issued out there that requires really detailed information in terms of and that's what an audit is. It's detailed information that is given to us to help us go ahead and improve. An executive summary doesn't do that. Every single report that I get is about this thick. The executive summary is 2 pages. How do we take an executive summary from the audits that were done previously and get good information? That would be my only concern.
Okay, I just thought the motion was, the summary itself was to go over and explain what has been done to improve it and make it better. So it's not just telling us what was audited, but also what HART has done to improve it and build upon that, so.
Yeah, Chair, and that's the reason why I'm saying that, instead of maybe doing what's been done, why don't we take a look at what's left to be done with this specific project when it comes to the remaining segment, and take a look at the recommendations that were made and see how those recommendations can be applied to what's left. And then hopefully that will help us move these things forward much more quickly.
Okay.
The concern on the part of the average person on the street is, why is the administration so reluctant to have a forensic audit? Are they fearful? So I'm saying transparency would go a long way toward restoring public confidence in this project. Transparency is the big issue here.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Thank
if I
you.
might
Yes.
just ask a point of clarification. I'm not sure I agree that the average person requires or desires that there be, that amount of money to be spent on an audit, forensic audit, because I'm not quite sure any of us understands at this point what that forensic audit would concentrate on, and which is going to be a big issue. However, my question is, for this group, I'm a little confused. Where are we going with this? Do we need an executive session right now to discuss what we're going to do with respect to, pursuing it? Or is this, where are we in this discussion? I would, before there is any decision made to pursue an executive, a forensic audit, I assume we're going to have to discuss that further. I just want to know when that's going to happen, or if it's going to happen.
Point of order.
Yeah.
We have a motion and it's been seconded, and it's only to direct staff to prepare a list of the audits and reviews that have been conducted with findings and responses. And that's the only thing that is before the board at this moment in time.
That is correct, yes. So we do just have a motion and a second on this item itself. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Okay. So I see 1, 2, 3. Am I,
So we raise hands?
yeah. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or raise hands, I'm sorry. And those opposed? Okay. Motion is passed. Item number 11, right-of-way, Abby?
Thank you again, Chair and Board members. Abby Mayer, Director of Planning, Permitting, and Right-of-Way. I have a right-of-way update for the board for your consideration. It was requested at the last meeting. And so I wanted to get you up to date on where we are in our property acquisitions. I'll be focusing on our airport and city center segments, and have our budget information at the end. So in general, I won't read them off, but our goals are always to balance our construction schedule, timing, and property need dates with our budget, along with maintaining sensitivity in respect to property owners and displacements that we're creating by our project. We also have to remain in compliance with the Federal Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Act, and which spells out in very direct terms specific steps of property acquisition and relocation processes every step of the way. So what we do is monitored by the FTA, and at several different points in the acquisition process, the FTA gives concurrence both on the adequacy of the appraisals, the amounts of the offers, and the terms of the agreements that we reach with property owners. As far as our airport guideway and stations contract segment, we have 49 tax map keys that are needed. We list here on this report 47 tax map keys with construction access. I would note that there are a couple properties that we list technically with construction access that have some ongoing either cost to cure, construction work that needs to go on in order to give full access to contractors, or ongoing legal issues that we're working with the owners on resolving. As far as our city center contract, I've broken it into two segments. One is Dillingham, because we're anticipating contracts for the early relocation of utilities, we kind of treat that separately and upfront, and have put a lot more emphasis into clearing the Dillingham corridor for right-of-way needs. A lot of the properties on Dillingham, because the guideway will be in the median, are needed for roadway widening. They're not actually needed for guideway facilities, but we have station properties. So we have 47 total tax map keys and 33 technically available. But I would add that some of these tax map keys are grouped together. So oftentimes contiguous properties, say 2 TMKs, are owned by the same owner, so we'll treat that as one acquisition. So the 14 that appear to be needed, to break those down, 3 are already in escrow awaiting land court. 2 are intergovernmental properties, 1 HCC and 1 OCCC, and actually we've, since the date of this report, we've cleared OCCC, went before the Board of Land and had the area needed taken out of the executive order that grants public safety those lands. Again, that's for the widening of Dillingham in that area. We have a HECO property. We have 3 cost to cure properties awaiting construction. Usually the facade of buildings too close to the widened roadway will be altered. And then only 3 private acquisitions remaining on Dillingham. So while it looks like there's 14 tax map keys, and technically there are only 3 private acquisitions remaining in the Dillingham corridor. And then City Center from Evilay to Ala Moana Station, 77 total tax map keys needed, 24 of which are construction access is in hand. Really the emphasis of our right-of-way group has been in establishing, over the past few months, establishing a work plan and putting together the RFPs and contractors that we're going to need to make a final push over the next year, really targeting August 2018 to attempt to complete all right-of-way acquisitions through City Center. The slide about eminent domain, just to review, it comes up in media inquiries and inquiries from City Council and legislators quite often. We've filed only 8 eminent domain cases throughout the whole corridor. 1 on West Oahu Farrington, 1 Kamehameha Highway. There's 2 active cases in airport, and we're probably going to file 1 more before the end of this year. And then 4 cases active in City Center. So eminent domain has been used very sparingly. A lot of these cases involve title issues where there's a lack of clarity on who has title, so we use the eminent domain process in order to secure entry while title issues are being resolved. As far as budget, I've listed 3 different budgets here for your examination. So our original FFGA budget is in the first column. The recovery plan budget, what we're proposing, is in your second column. There is a proposed increase. You'll see there. The current budget, the third column in the middle, is the budget we're now working off of. So to explain the changes, you'll see between the original FFGA budget and the current budget, we've actually had a decrease overall of about $6 million. That is due to the transfer of a contract out of right-of-way to design and construction. Otherwise, the budget has largely stayed the same. We have repurposed some of the acquisition funds toward contracts. That includes real estate consultants, legal fees, drawing a blank here on our other contracts. We have a series of a few contracts. The big ones are our real estate consultants, so it used to be Paragon, is now Colliers. And then, I'm sorry, our appraisals are a big piece of those contracts as well. So in previous contract with Paragon, our appraisals were ordered through that contract. They're now separated out of the real estate contract and they're contracted separately. The expended column is accurate as of June 30th. So altogether, and you can see the categories in which we've spent, 132 of the 216 million has been spent already, and leaving a balance of 84 million. And that's the part of the presentation. Be glad to answer any questions on any of those.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think you guys probably know this, but I didn't. Your report on the right-of-way doesn't include the pillars for the guideway? That's under another department?
The right-of-way is, so in certain situations, we need to acquire land for the placement of the pillars, and sometimes they're in a state highway or a city roadway, which we have joint occupancy and use agreements for those in those locations.
Your Dillingham, can you go back to the Dillingham slide? That was only for temporary utilities. It's not for anything else.
No, that's all. The only thing actually missing from these numbers is we had a fairly recent determination by HECO that we're going to need to underground 138 kV lines along Dillingham. So the right-of-way need lines for that project have not been determined yet, but these tax map keys include the guideway columns will be in the median of Dillingham, but Dillingham will be widened. So a lot of these tax map keys are for the widened Dillingham roadway, but not for the guideway itself.
Okay, so it includes, this chart includes all the work on Dillingham, not just HECO?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So Abby, this chart, the next chart is CCGS. So physically, is this all of CCGS, or is this second chart just from Eva Lake to Almore?
So the city center contract will be from Middle Street to Almore. For the purpose of this presentation, we've separated the city center contract into Dillingham corridor and then the remainder. So this slide is Eva Lake to Almore.
Okay, now did we do, I know we got Frank just on board, but I think we need to, one of the PMOC recommendations was to work on how we're going to procure. Is this one big package, or are there things we can do so that certain areas we're good to go, or almost good to go? Okay, obviously we got problems on Dillingham. What about CCGS remaining? Well, we're still working on Dillingham, so we need to work.
Yeah, we are working on those strategies, and one of the important issues is the availability. The funding if the funding is all available, can we just move ahead with the whole package to get it out? If not, the issue has been to advance the utility relocations, so that way when the final contractor comes in, he has got a clear site to go ahead and do the construction.
Because we need to learn from the west side when we issued these huge contracts.
Yes, sir.
And we got HECO issues, we got sewer line, water line issues.
Absolutely.
Not resolved in Dillingham, but we pretty much resolved on the balance of it. So how best should we break up this project, if at all?
We will definitely come back with a recommendation on the strategy there. We just need to get some clarity on the funding, of what we can do, what we cannot do.
Right, I understand.
But we are working with the final design of the utility relocations as we were talking about.
Yeah, because I know we don't have the answer on funding, but we should still be planning.
Yes, sir.
And I can also add that we have, from my knowledge, increased the SUE work, the underground exploratory work through City Center, and we at Right of Way have been working very closely with construction on when they receive findings identifying a schedule of need and which properties are needed in what order. So we are actively looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different pieces, and part of it is your piece. And we got HECO issues, we got the water supply issue, right? So we need all these pieces to come together.
It is the most complicated part of the program, yes.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, you mentioned that Colliers has replaced Paragon. Is it the local office of Colliers?
It is, yes.
And who are the primary individuals?
Gail Jennings is the project lead, and then is supervised by the local president of Colliers, Sarah Morihara.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, can I go back to the CGS, City Center Guideway Stations? And your budget does not include then, because you said the recovery plan budget is the 268, current budget 216. Does that include the cost for acquisition of right-of-way and for the city center area?
So the major changes, so you have about $52 million difference between the current budget and the recovery plan. About 20 million of the 52 is for utilities that were not anticipated at the time of the FFGA. A lot of those were already acquired. The remaining 32 million was a replenishment of contingency and amounts identified in the risk refresh exercise in 2016.
Okay, so is this dependent on new funding, or is it already in our budget, in existing funding?
This is the total overall existing funding.
Existing funding.
Yes.
So is it your view that we can make the acquisitions necessary to build the city center guideway and stations with existing funding? We just can't build the guideway yet?
Yes.
Okay. And the percentage then of completion you are, I don't know if I can read this right. It's for construction access, it's 30% completed?
For city center outside of Dillingham?
Yes.
Yeah, it's around 1/3.
And for Dillingham, it's 70% completed? Am I reading this right?
Yeah, it's about there. I don't have the percentages calculated myself, but that looks to be about right. Morris Atta, our right-of-way deputy, is here.
Morris.
Microphone.
I'm Morris Atta, Deputy Director for Right of Way. I think I'm anticipating where you're going with this, in that you're looking at the budget amount that's remaining versus what we have before us in terms of what acquisitions still needed. The one critical factor that needs to be considered is that much of the remaining acquisitions are all very tiny slivers of property, even though they're identified as individual acquisitions. The acquisitions themselves are primarily like green strips in front of property. So that may be the reason for the disconnect between the dollar amount that you're seeing and the number of properties that we have required before us in the city's administration.
The other thing I can add is that our availability for construction is different than our closed transactions. So the amount expended is relating to our closed real estate transactions. Our construction access might involve a right of entry or a property that's in escrow that hasn't been fully expended. So they're different metrics. It's a little bit apples and oranges.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. Moving to item number 12, construction and traffic update. Kainani, John, Justin, and Nick.
Board Kainani Kraut, the West Side Construction Manager. We'll start on the west with the Wolf and Guideways. So the West Oahu Farrington Guideway, again, anticipated completion of punch list items July 2017. The contract completion was in March. There's about 165 remaining items out of just over 7,000 that were identified, and we're working with core systems to turn over the guideway and safety security to make sure we have our certification in place. The West Oahu Station Group, we're about 22% complete. The contract completion is March, identified in the contract as March 2018 due to some initial delays. The contract is looking to be completed in June 2019. At Ho'opili, we've removed the false work for the box girders. They're excavated the elevator pits, and reinforcement is commencing. They're pulling wire for the lighting at the TCCR room. At UH West Oahu, we do have a conflict there that we're working through with the 46 kV relocation infrastructure that is going underground. Elevated beams at the west entrance of the building and ped bridge columns have been completed with the false work for the box girders on the east side of the guideway. And that at East Kapolei, we completed the grounding grid installation at the west foundation area and reinforcement for grade beams and concrete placement for future escalator and elevator pits. On the Farrington Highway Station Group, that's the one that's really visible in Waipahu, we're 25% complete. Contract completion is January 2018, and again, due to initial delays, it is anticipated to finish in February of 2019. The West Lock Station area is about 36% complete. The Mackay Ped Bridge and elevator structural steel is in place. There's 2 box girders placed and tension. The entrance building walls are construction and installing the interior utilities. On the Mauka side, the Ped Bridge has also been set with fabricating and erecting the elevator structural steel. At the Waipahu Transit Center, the station work is about 22% complete, and we're installing the formwork reinforcement for the box girders, walls, and bottom slab. On the Mackay side, we're installing the vertical raceway conduit and duct work and performing mass excavation. And on the Mauka side, we're demobilizing drills that we're doing the auger cast piles there. At LCC, we're about 9% complete. We're continuing formwork for the box girders, installing the walls of the ancillary building and the grounding grid at the stairway area and excavating that elevator pits. H2R2 is about 92% complete. We are working with DOT to transition that. There was a slight delay due to a redesign on a bridge rail, so the anticipated completion is more like November 2017, but we do have to secure the site, so it's good. The paving's been complete, the permanent striping's done, installing the slope matting, hydro seeding, just kind of wrapping up the work there. Cam Highway Guideway, we have executed a time extension, so the time extension and the contract completion date is now September 2017. We are still in the process of doing the highway medians. You'll see a lot of work going on there. There's 2 traffic signal upgrades that are remaining. We are doing widening at Pearl Ridge Shopping Center, Mauna Loa Freeway, and there's a retaining wall at Waimalu Shopping Center. 100% of the track has been completed with the contact rail, and we're working with core systems to start turning over the rail there as well. And the Cam Highway Station Group's about 12%. The original contract completion was May of 2019. The contractor has been delayed in doing some of their drilled shafts at Pearl Highlands. So their updated schedule looks like August 2019, but those delays are on them. The Pearl Highlands Station, again, drilled shaft and column construction activities continue. There's about 18 out of the 32 production shafts that have been done, with 7 out of the 32 columns that have been completed. At Pearl Ridge Station, we completed the construction of CMU retaining wall and associated backfill operations. We're continuing trenching and installation of comm and power, basically doing the site work and utility work to get out of the ground there. And Aloha Stadium, we have in the last week turned over the station site from Kiewit to NON, so NON can start their station work in the area. This is just the graphic showing the percent by station rather than just by contract. MSF, we are looking to issue a final acceptance either the end of this month or the end of next month. KKJB has a delivery of isolation pads that are still due for the east side. That was part of the rail procurement under that contract. And then the safety and security certification is expected to be issued. We just advertised and in the process of evaluating the bids for Road B, which is associated with UH Park and Ride, and then the substation is at MSF is currently still in the planning stages. Now I'm going to turn it over to Justin.
Hi, my name is Justin Garrett. I'm the Deputy Director for Core Systems. I'll give you the systems update. We're 44% complete with vehicles and core systems installation. Our anticipated completion is October 2025, consistent with the completion of the City Center Guideway. MSF activities were about 80% complete, working towards completing TPSS and signaling work by fourth quarter 2017. Out on the Guideway, we have traction electrification work and signaling work happening on the Wolf Guideway. KHG, we have mobilized our traction electrification crews out there, starting to pull cable and land devices on that piece of Guideway. Communication systems installation is ongoing at the maintenance facility. This is in preparation for our functional testing and integrated testing of the train and signalings down the road a little bit. And then lastly, Waipahu Traction Power Substation. We're on hold presently to begin that activity until we have permanent power from Hawaiian Electric. We have made some strides in the last couple of weeks where we anticipate that power being energized, if everything goes well, by the end of the month. And that'll trigger follow-on activities to move us that much closer to the start of our dynamic testing of the vehicles. That's where we turn on power when we start that initial testing of the train itself.
Hi, good morning. My name is John Moore. I'm the construction manager of the East. And the airport utilities package, that contract has been completed and is in final closeout. The airport guideway and station group, we're about 9% complete through May. The potholing is about 2/3 completed. We have performed, SCG has performed 2 test shafts, 1 and 2, and they're in the various final stages of actually being evaluating the data that's been gathered through those test shafts. Test shaft number 3, which is going to be over in the paintball area, is scheduled for next month, and that'll complete all of the test shafts that were being anticipated by STG for this contract. The design is continuing slightly ahead of schedule across all areas. Right now, STG is still looking, and I believe it's very positive that starting in October, they're going to start permanent drill shafts on the western part. If you go out where KHG ends near Aloha Stadium, that section from their east, they have about 20 shafts they plan to get in before the end of this year. So they're actually working a little bit ahead of schedule. It's not listed up there, but they were talking about the city center section. I also have to be the project manager for the on-call contract, and I work closely with Abby and Morris. And we have been doing work along Dillingham and also on the airport. As they acquire properties, if the properties need to be modified, we have gone in to work with the owner and modify the property so it's still functional, has a functional use. We've completed a number of them. We're out there right now at OCCC. If you go by there, you'll see a lot of work going on in their parking lot. Please don't visit because they will arrest you if you go on their property. You have to be pre-approved. And also, we've been working on Mauna Kea, which is the relocation of Hawaiian Tail Duck Bank that over a 4-block section that crosses across Dillingham. So there is work that's ongoing in the city center area that's clearing the way for whenever we get a design-build contractor, that they have the space to work to help facilitate that construction. And that's the end of my report.
And then the last update is just some closures that are continuing to occur due to John's work, various daytime and nighttime closures between Alava and Radford Drive. And that's all we have.
Anybody have any questions for?
Just a question. You know the construction completion percentages, how far behind is your spend rate in terms of what you're actually paying out? In other words, when we get a financial at the end of the month, is it real time? If you're 40% complete of a particular project, how much have you actually expended out in terms of paying for the invoices attached to that 40% completion?
I'm not sure what report you're getting. I know the CMS usually is based on what is the invoices received from the contractor. And then we have a 30-day process to actually expend it from BFS. But I would have to verify the report that you get versus what we look at.
Bertha, can we just take a look at what the spend rate is?
Sure.
I want to make sure that when we're looking at the finances and we're looking at it is real time. I know we lag quite a bit, just like you, because of the 30-day, but I don't want to report that we have so much money basically as far as the end of the month financials, when in fact that money has already been committed to work that's already been completed. So I think having that number would help us make a better determination in terms of how best to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. Have we had any incidents of vandalism or graffiti along the completed thick guideway?
Yes.
And has it been major, minor, or?
We have dealt with it, so we've taken care of it.
And the cost of remedying the
Currently,
problem?
until it's in our possession, it's on the contractor.
And do
to
we have any
secure their
protocols in place that would prevent future incidents of vandalism or graffiti?
I'm not quite sure. We're working with safety and security as well as maintenance and operation. They'll be the ones accepting it. And we have put in place, the fencing. I'm not quite sure how we're handling security once it's turned over, but we can get that information and report back to you.
What about homelessness? Any homeless residents there?
We have worked with the state as well as DFM on those issues as they arise, as we're notified. So we're continuing to do that. Once it's turned over, depending on the structure with DTS and DFM, I'm not sure who will be taking over that responsibility.
Well, we have to be ever vigilant as to vandalism, graffiti, and homelessness.
Yes, I agree.
Continuing problem. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Justin Garrett, I want to just thank you for your service for HART. I know this is your last meeting and you're finishing up, when are you leaving? At the end of this month?
The 28th, next
28th,
Friday.
next Friday. So again, I want to just thank you for all the work you've done. Excellent with the core systems itself. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been a
Best of
pleasure.
luck to you.
Thanks.
On item number 13 and 14, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, you have the reports in your package. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer on those.
Any questions, board? If not, moving on to item number 15, which is report of the permitted interaction group.
Excuse me, I think I do have one question.
Go ahead.
It's kind of a detailed one. On page 9 of the monthly report,
Yes, sir.
at the top of that page, there's a project progress chart. And under the late plan column, the design progress row, there's a 69.1%. In the prior month, it was actually 69.2%. I would think that actually we'd be making more progress towards design, not less. And maybe this is just a technicality or a mathematical rounding error or whatever, but it just struck me as being very odd that we're going backwards in design. Please assure me that that's not the case.
It's not the case. Thank you for pointing it out.
Yes, would you please look into that and see if there's some kind of, if it's a typo or some other concern we should have on that?
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, item number 15, report of the permitted interaction group to recruit, solicit interest from, screen, and negotiate with candidates for interim executive director and chief executive officer and/or executive director of chief executive officer. I'll report that to Terry. Executive session.
Yep.
I'd like to request that we move into executive session, so pursuant to HRS Section 92-4 and subsection 92-5A2, to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or employee of charges brought against the officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved, as well as under HRS subsection 92-5A4, to consult with its attorneys or questions and issues on a matter pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities.
Can I get a motion to executive session?
So moved.
Here, a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We'll break for recess for executive session. So we're back from executive session on item number 15. We are going to, I don't know if I should make the announcement now, I don't know where Core Counsel is, but we are going to recess to tomorrow at 7 a.m. At Ali'i Place, room 150, to continue our discussion in executive session. Item number 16, appointment of the Executive Director, Chief CEO, that will be deferred as well. Can I call for adjournment?
So moved. Second. Oh, wait.
Yes. Oh, sorry, we're not calling for
Oh, yeah,
adjournment.
that's
We're
right.
recessing for tomorrow. Can I call for a
withdraw.
recess? Withdraw. Can I call for
Second.
recess? Thank you. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? We are in recess till tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock at Ali'i Place, again, room 150, to go into executive session. Thank you.